Hey y'all, today I had the opportunity to talk to Nathan Anderson. He's the CTO at a startup called Tú TeleDoc, where they're building a technology platform to transform healthcare in Latin America. And we talk about AI and how it's transforming our industry and how to avoid AI regret. Nathan shares valuable advice for newcomers to this brave new technical world that we're in. And he also shares how he achieved continuous daily deployments at previous gigs. It was such a fun conversation to talk with Nathan. I loved it. I hope you guys enjoy it as well. This is episode 18 of How Not to Build. Nathan, dude, thanks for coming on the podcast and chatting with me today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, Dan.
First things first, what are you glad about, Nathan? What's good?
Glad about. I am glad to be in tech at the time that we are in tech, because there's this massive change happening, more so than at any point in my long career. And that's exciting. It's scary and it's exciting, and it's a cool time to be here. So yeah, I'm excited for that.
What, if there's one thing that you're most excited about? You're right, there's a lot that we could be scared of, but if there's one thing we're most excited about, what would it be?
I think it's just being able to do more of what I love faster. I could get more output. AI is kind of the elephant in the room, right? Like, I can use tools to build more things faster than I ever could before. Is it helping me build things better? Maybe in some cases. I think, and we could go down that rabbit hole, but I feel like it's letting me do more of what I love, and I don't have to spend as much time in the kind of busy, messy work. I get to spend more time doing the actual fun part of it, which is innovating.
So actually, we're going to get into it right here, right now. So
yeah.
I'm going to take this rabbit trail. I have a friend who I talked to just literally 2 days ago on Wednesday, senior chief architect at the startup that he's at. And he got laid off. And the CEO told him, I just vibe coded this thing over the last 3 days. I can do all this myself. Thanks, but no thanks. I don't need you. So he lays him off. I don't know how many other people were involved, because I just kind of texted back and forth with this person a little bit, but he got canned because AI, quote unquote, took his job. And that's coming from a CEO. I don't know the technical background of the CEO. What do you say to that?
So I think lots of decisions can be made in the heat of the moment. I'd love to check back in with that situation in 6 months and see, is that app still up and running? You know, is the tech stack falling over due to security issues, performance issues, compliance issues? I mean, you could go on. I think it's like handing a surgeon a scalpel when all they've had is a pocket knife their whole career. And that surgeon is like, this is amazing. I can do a such better job of this surgery that I do. I am a heart surgeon, and I can do it with more precision. I can do it safer. I can do it faster, more repeatable, et cetera, et cetera. But fundamentally, an office administrator is not going to be able to use that scalpel and perform the same work, right? It still takes a seasoned software engineer who understands security, who understands compliance, who understands scalability, who understands all these things, to use this tool to make you go faster and better, more repeatable if you use it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be amazing for that high quality engineer. But there was a story, I can't even remember the name of the company, but this guy was on Twitter and he's like, I'm going to create a product from scratch. And he's not a software engineer, and he's doing this live and, all in the open. And he launched, and then 2 weeks later, a week and a half later, he goes back. I had to take my app down because the whole thing was falling over. I vibe coded this thing in a week and a half, but none of it works now. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing that we're going to see, right? You're going to see fallout from this non-technical vibe coder, I can eliminate all software developers lie. You call it a lie, but just don't think it's going to pan out. It's not going to play out over the long haul.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. And if there's any skeptics listening that are like, well, you guys are two tech people, of course you're going to say that, we still need you. I think your analogy of when something goes wrong, like, can you find out why? And I don't know, I'm always looking for good examples, like a car. Like, okay, even though you can buy a completed car off the lot, right? If you have the money, you just walk away with a fully functional car. Like, that's pretty freaking amazing. As soon as something goes wrong with that car, are you going to pop the hood? Are you going to be sure? You could do that with like hours of YouTube videos, but you're going to go to a technician. You're going to get them to pop the hood. They're going to solve the problem and give it back to you. And I feel like And that's, cars are like 100% automated these days, right? Like with the factories and stuff. So but they still need the technicians. So I think our job will change, yes, but I think you're never really fully going to just get away from, I'm a CEO, I don't need a CTO or any kind of technical team anymore.
I think it'll be interesting for us to have the same conversation in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Because 3 years ago, AI was not even remotely close to the state that it's in today. And so it's changed, evolved, and grown so much. We have so many companies that have come out with various products, whether it's image or video or software or text creation kind of tools that didn't exist really 3 years ago. And I think, will that answer change in 3 years? I don't know, maybe. And maybe it is the, I guess, entrenched desire to maintain our sense of importance in this industry that's kind of jading our answer when they say no, it's never going to replace good software engineers.
Hmm.
But right now, they're not good enough to do that. And I don't
Sure.
foresee them getting that good in the short term. I think that the class of worker that it really challenges is the junior software engineer, because
Hmm.
it's hard for me to fathom a new college graduate with no experience, with some several years of book learning and maybe even some little side projects that they've picked up if at best, coming into the market and competing, right? And I have a 17-year-old who wants to be a game developer. And I'm super excited for him, but the advice I keep giving him is learn how to use these new tools. No one's going to hire you if you're not using new tools, the AI tools, the modern whole tool sets. And for the same reason that I don't think a game developer who only knows assembly is really going to find a job. It's not a useful skill anymore. Frameworks, modern software languages are a much, much better, faster way to produce product. And so nobody cares that you can make it 2.5% more efficient if you code
Hmm.
something in assembly, because it's going to take you 9 months longer. So you have to use the modern tools. And right now, the modern tool is AI. And if you don't know how to use it, you're not going to move anywhere as a software developer.
Do you have a suggestion on what that looks like? I had a friend come to me recently, because I've actually taught before in the past, and I had a friend come to me saying, "Hey, you should teach an intro to programming course." And I hesitate. I'm like, I don't think that's what we need right now. Like, I don't think we need yet another course to do like the basics of HTML and JavaScript. But it's a conundrum because, well, if I don't start there, what do I start with? Like, here's bolt.new, and then what am I trying to teach out of bolt.new? So, do you have a suggestion there for like, if that entry level developer position is the one that's most threatened, how does that need to change for people who still want to get into tech? How do they learn? How do they start with that AI tool without being just completely overwhelmed by the thousands of lines of code that bolt.new is going to give them when they click export?
And that's an excellent question. And I've wrestled with that too, because I've been pulled into high school computer science curriculums to come talk to their students. I've been talked to a number of college professors about this, and I've had a lot of people approach me
Mm,
in my
mm.
life. I want to get into tech. I want to be a software developer. Where do I start? And there's so many good free and inexpensive resources online to learn how to code right now. It's a very saturated
There's
market
too
with
many.
that, right? Too many, right? And so I do think that having a little bit of fundamentals under your belt before you start playing around with these tools is going to be a good thing. But instead of telling bolt.do to export some massive, project for you and try to decipher that, because even mid-range developers are going to have a hard time really fully grokking all that code. Start with the basics. Start with Claude Code or Copilot and do Hello World level stuff. Do the very, very basics. The CS curriculum always takes you through this progression of Hello World. And by the end of CS 101, you're doing some basic interactive stuff. You're doing some very simple kind of REST calls, and pulling data from third parties and building a web app that, takes as a form, it takes data and shows you data and saves data in database. All this, you get some small but fundamental app work, and go through that same
Mm.
evolution using something like Copilot or Claude or whatever your tool is, and have it work through those examples and go through them all and have it explain to you what it's doing along the way.
Mm,
Ask it questions as if it was your professor. And I think the tools can actually do a really good job of teaching you that kind of stuff.
mm.
But yeah, some basic
Good.
fundamental understanding of how to do software development is super important, right? If if I were to hire you into my startup, or you were to hire an engineer into your startup right now, even if they're using these tools, they still have to know what the code is doing at the end of the day. It's still a human signing off on this PR and shipping code and debugging it in production. And so you have to hire someone who has those skills. You learn those skills through the schooling and through experience. So some of that doesn't change, just the acceleration of where you learn it might shift around.
I think that's a really good answer. It makes me think of my oldest is 12, and I've been helping her lately on her math. And it makes me think of the analogy of like everyone, no matter who you are, you still have to learn the basics of math, even though we have these calculators that can do math that my brain can't even comprehend. We learn the basics, and then we introduce the calculator sort of at the right time, right? And then kind of rely on the calculator for a lot of those other things once you know the basics. And maybe there's an analogy there for like, hey, you should always know the basics of
Yeah.
HTML, JavaScript, but pretty much as soon as you understand some of these fundamentals, let the AI do the work. So it's a tool
Yeah.
in the tool belt.
Yeah. You still need to know your times tables. You still need to know how to do multiplication and division by hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Long division. You
Mm-hmm.
still need those fundamentals. But no one's doing calculus fully by hand, right? We're using modern tools. Heck, even my dad was using slide rules back in the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Late 60s, early 70s. Tools are an important piece of that, but it doesn't replace the fundamental knowledge. That's still needed. It's a harder market for junior software engineers right
Yeah.
now than ever before, but these fundamentals are the same. You still need to know.
All right. Well, next, that was just the intro question. We're 12 minutes into it. I
Get
love
the
it.
easy stuff out of the way, and now we could get into the real hard stuff.
Well, my next question is, what are you anxious about?
What am I anxious about? I guess if I take your question to mean kind of professionally in my particular position, then man, I got to get a product to market. I've
Mm,
got a small team of developers, and we're cranking away and
yeah.
and having fun doing it, and we're getting feedback from our target customers, and that feels great. And so I'm anxious to get revenue flowing
Yeah.
in my early stage startup. I think industry wise, what makes me anxious, there's so much hype. There's so much hype going on right now. And weeding through that to wait and kind of let some things suss out and see what tech actually sticks and what tech kind of falls by the wayside.
Mm,
I know the tech that works for me, and I've dabbled with a whole bunch of stuff and played around with most tools. But I kind of stick to the basic stuff. I'm not doing anything really fancy. So just kind of weeding through the hype cycle,
mm,
and these layoffs are brutal, man.
yeah.
I mean, Amazon laying off
Yeah, I was
so
about
many
to
people
say
this week,
AWS.
that hurts my soul because
Yeah.
I know a lot of people affected directly by that. And so I'm anxious about that. I'm hoping some of that settles down, but nothing I can control.
Yeah, I suppose that's an inevitable. I mean, we've been talking about that for 3 years about AI, somehow or the other replacing jobs. And I do think there's cases where it's ridiculous, like the example I gave earlier with the
Yeah.
CEO and the
Yeah.
chief architect. And then there's other examples where, depending on your perspective, my perspective is completely legitimate. It's like, yeah, we can actually do more. Maybe we need less people, doing low level engineering because AI is doing that, right? It sucks for those people, don't get me wrong, but that is kind of the natural movement of the market when new tools are introduced and everything. So some of it we should expect, I guess. It shouldn't surprise us when it happens, but like you said, it still hurts because you hate to see those individuals affected.
It's people you and I know and have worked with and have respect for. And it's just hard to
Yeah,
watch people's lives negatively affected by that.
absolutely. I want to go back at least once, maybe twice. You mentioned the tech stack. You are a CTO. We'll get into that a little more in a minute here. What's your favorite? What's the tech stack you use now? What's your core tech?
Man, I am an old guy. I've used a lot of different tech stacks and frameworks in my career, and I'd say the tech stack that I'm probably most directly comfortable with. If I was starting a vanilla project right now, kind of be a toss up between Python. Python's kind of my go-to for a lot of things. The startup I'm working on right now is a React app. So React, Next.js, and I'm really loving it. I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Nice.
So those are the two that I kind of gravitate towards, generally speaking. But yeah, a bunch of my little side projects, the fun stuff's all little Python tools.
Yeah, nice. You use Python for web development?
I have, yeah.
What's your favorite framework in the Python world?
The one that I'm most familiar with is the big heavyweight Django, right?
Okay.
That's the one that I've played around with the most. There are some much lighter weight stuff, but I don't have a lot of personal experience with that. My side projects are all like data processing, home automation kind of stuff, and so I'm
Yeah.
not a lot of it is web based.
That's actually really cool. I think that's something that, for a while I was just like, software engineering is only apps, web apps. And then you get into it and you're like, the world is so diverse, and I actually love any kind of little like automation, IoT. Like there's a lot of really cool kind of hardware based event driven stuff that to me is actually more fun to develop, I think, because I don't know, maybe it's less known, maybe it's more physical oriented than just a website or something, but it's good. Okay, I'm going to save that. I was thinking in your answer about being anxious about the product.
Yeah.
But I'm going to save that for just a minute.
Okay.
The last intro question is, what are you hopeful about?
What am I hopeful about? Question. I don't think I have a great pre-canned answer for that. I'm hopeful that it's kind of the inverse of the hype cycle stuff, right? Like I'm hopeful that some of this hype cycle stuff dies down and we start to get into an era where there's more realistic, marketing slogans used around how AI is going to help people, and it's a less fear and doom and gloom and it's going to kill all these jobs, or it's you're going to be your career is toast if you don't know how to use these tools, or it's going to save you and make you 1,000 times more productive. Like at some point all this is just hyperbole, and the reality is a lot less sexy than that, I think. And it's kind of eager to get back to a world where we're kind of done with all the extreme marketing statements, and we can actually talk about the actual ROI of these tools. And
Yeah.
that's that CEO example that you used, right? I feel like in some period of time we're going to have enough data to show that that's not the right approach. A non-technical person using these technical tools cannot replace technology workers entirely, and once that starts to become a little bit more well understood, then I think things get a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so getting into kind of where you're at now a little bit, give us just a real quick, 1 or 2 minute summary. You're the CTO of a company called Tú TeleDoc?
Tú TeleDoc, yes.
And what are you guys doing at Tú TeleDoc?
We are building a telemedicine platform for Latin America and starting in Mexico. And we have some really great launch partners lined up in Latin America who want this app to live in their kind of super app, mini app ecosystems. And so that's what we're building.
Awesome. Now, anytime somebody becomes a CTO, I'm always very interested in their story, like how, what were the steps along the way? What kind of led you to wanting that or being, feeling qualified for that, if you can ever feel qualified for that? So how did you start? How did you get into tech? Kind of walk us through some of the major inflection points of your career.
I never honestly sought out a position in leadership. I never sought out CTO. I never had these life plans to become a EVP by the time I'm 35. Like I never really thought that far ahead about my future, to be honest with you. I kind of stumbled into it. So I started as a software developer back when I was like, I don't know, 9, maybe 10 years old. So we're talking like the mid 80s, in early to mid 80s. My dad bought a personal computer for our house in the very early days. I was the only one that I knew that had a PC at home. And it was a Heath Zenith 8088. He and I soldered the motherboard together in our living room. Like it was old school, right? Pre 286 days, right? Like early Intel architecture stuff. So,
how did he know to do that? Was he an engineer?
no, he's a chemist. And so my dad's kind of a Renaissance man, right? He's of this era where something seems interesting and you go check out some books at the library, you learn a whole bunch about it, and then you just go do the thing. And so he at the lab he was working at as a chemist, as a bench chemist in the pharmaceutical industry, they had this need to take a tray that has like 200 test tubes in it and do a whole bunch of things to it, right? Add 3 drops of this liquid, stir it for 30 seconds, and then add 2 drops of this liquid, stir it for 50 seconds, and then in a centrifuge, and then put it back in a tray, right? Times 200. And so they bought this like robot, real basic, simple kind of robot arm on an articulating arm that could do all of these things, right? And
Mm.
move pipettes around and move all this stuff. So he learned GW Basic in order to be able to program this thing to do all of this rote repetitive work. So he comes home and he's like, we need a PC. Like this is the future. We need a PC in this house. And so we didn't have whole lot of money. So, he bought the cheapest thing he could, which is a kind of
Hmm.
a build it yourself kit model. And so we did, and we had this, and it was an amber screen. It was super old school, right? The big 5.5-inch floppies and all this. And so he taught me what he knew about GW Basic.
Mm. Mm.
And it's a language you used to teach people. So it was very, very easy for me to learn. And he bought these books that have these games in it and it's like 300-page book, and it has these games that you retype. Like you transcribe the code for these games. And I remember this one Star Trek game, and it was really, really simple text only Star Trek game, and I just loved it. And the retyping of that code taught me how to read the code. Introduction of typos of my own, bugs, made me
Yeah.
have to learn a little bit about debugging. And then I got the game up and running, and I thought, okay, I bet I could do some cool stuff with this. I bet I could add color. I bet I could change the color of this text to red if there was like Klingons nearby or something. And I did. And so I learned how to modify this. And so by the end of all those exercises, I knew how to code GW Basic. Not real helpful in the grand scheme of things, but then I taught myself Pascal from there because I was on BBSs and dial-up internet days, and I heard Pascal.
BBSs. What are BBSs?
Oh wow, bulletin boards back
I mean, that's for the
pre-internet. That's for
listeners,
the
not for
kids
me.
these days,
Yeah.
yeah. So back pre-internet, right? This is like the late '80s, kind of time frame, mid to late '80s. Didn't have
Pre-internet.
internet. Didn't have internet, but you could use your modem on your computer to dial into a local computer bank, and there was like a message boards, and people could so think of it as like a chat system, real basic chat system, and message boards, and you could go download stuff that people had uploaded. And back then people were just kind of uploading shareware games and tools and stuff like that. And so I got involved in that, and I learned a lot from those communities. And this is a very hacker culture, good natured, everybody's helping everybody. Didn't matter that I'm a 12-year-old kid talking to probably 65-year-old guys on the other side of town. Everyone was super helpful, and
Awesome.
so I learned a lot. These guys told me Pascal's the language you need to learn next, and so I downloaded a compiler and taught myself Pascal before I was even in middle school, right? And so that was
Man,
kind of the beginning of
that's
my
wild.
eagerness. I was just this sponge for this stuff because, man, it was fun. And so, long story short, well, long story long, I guess. I go into college. I'm not studying computer science. I kind of find my way and realize computer science is my path. And I end up as a software engineer. I ended up dropping out of school because I got one part-time job, led to a better job, led to a better job. And next thing I know, I've got offers to make, $30,000 salary back in like the very late 90s. And man, that was like, it felt like $1 million to me at the time. And,
Yeah.
and I told
Yeah.
myself, I'll go back eventually, go back to school and finish my degree eventually. And I think I told myself that, and I told my parents that just to kind of make everybody feel good, but I've never gone back, right? So kind of flourished from there. And then I was a handful of years into working at Rackspace. I got into Rackspace very, very early. Very fortunate and lucky to know some people there who took a chance on me and pulled me in. I was a handful of years into that, and one of the team that I was on, our manager moved on to another part of the company, and he, like my teammates all looked at me and said, "Hey Nathan, would you be our boss now? Because we don't trust anybody else coming in, and you like people, we don't. And so, like, if you're our manager, then you get to go deal with all the people, and we can still code." And they were kind of right. I thrive on relationships, so that's what I did, and I became a dev manager at that point. And no training, no guidance, just thrown into it and never looked back. So that
So,
kind of began my career in leadership.
okay. So, yeah, maybe before we get into that a little bit more too, I mean, having started this in the 80s, we just talked about AI. One of the questions that a lot of, well, it's particularly the one friend I have, he's always challenging me. He says, he's a non-technical person, right? So, but very, very business savvy. And he's always asking me, he says, what's changing and what's not changing? Because he wants to invest time and energy in the things that are not changing. So, looking back on 8-year-old Nate in the 80s and then, not even finishing school, like what things did you see back then that you see now that's like, hey, these are the things that haven't changed, even with AI coming about, that maybe the junior engineer, maybe the senior engineer, just anybody in tech should be considering looking at, focusing on?
Think fundamental business problems are still fundamental business problems, right? Every business needs
Mm,
accounting, every business needs billing, every business needs process automation, there's just always will be, I think, a massive market for tools that just help businesses run more efficiently and faster. And I think AI can solve for some of those things differently than before, right? Especially with things like process automation. But accounting is accounting, and AI can help you a bit maybe on some of the analysis of that. But fundamental GL accounting is never going to go away, right? That's
mm-hmm.
always going to be a thing that people need. And so I'd say find niches in the market that never go away like that and learn how to apply business skills to technology as a solution to those problems, and you'll go far in your career, right?
Mm,
Learning how, my dad always told me from the time I started college, he's like, okay, you're doing computer science, that's great. Take an accounting class, like take some business classes.
mm,
And I thought that was the most ridiculous advice he could have ever given me. It's like, I want to go pure tech, Dad. Like I'm a software engineer. And then sure enough, every single time I had a major project at work, it was integrate with this accounting system. Well, I don't even know fundamental business accounting principles. What is GL? Like I had to ask someone that one time. I
yeah.
had to ask my CFO, what does GL even mean when I'm a software engineer? And look, if I had taken some basic accounting classes, I would have known that. So
Mm,
learn the fundamentals of business and learn how you can apply tech to solve those problems. Like those are never going to go away. Look, there's always going to be some fancy, fun, cool, innovative edge case of AI or graphics rendering or something that you could niche, specialize in, and have an amazing career. But the stuff that's never going to go away is the fundamental stuff.
Is there, I'm thinking, I don't know if this is the right connection I'm making, but we've seen a lot of buzz lately that like SaaS is dead. And I think part of that mentality is like fundamental business problems have all been solved already, or they're so known that you could throw an AI at it and the AI will solve it. But it sounds like you're kind of saying like, well, there's always going to be more, especially within a niche, there's always going to be more things that are yet to be solved from a business perspective.
Probably. I think so, right? I do think that the SaaS is dead claim is more hype. I think
Yeah.
it's not dead, it's shifting a lot, right? I think there was a trend to create a SaaS tool for every little micro need of a business under the sun. And then businesses, some of whom I was a part of, a leader of, like we realized we had 50, 80, 90 tool, SaaS bills that we were getting for various things. And so consolidation of that market is
Mm-hmm.
natural and normal. And so I'm not at all surprised to see SaaS companies being bought, SaaS companies being replaced, maybe a new SaaS product comes out that replaces three other tools you used to have and unifies them from a data and process perspective and from a billing perspective, and that's good. Like that's healthy market competition. So is it dead? No, it's just been challenged, and the fact is you could bring a SaaS tool to market faster today than you ever could before. So
Mm-hmm.
companies that I've worked for that spent a decade building something, you could probably, the smart team could probably build the same thing in a year and a half now. And
Mm,
18 months to build what used to take you a decade. And part of that is just we know more about that domain. So we have a better starting point. Then part of it is we just have better tools to get you there faster.
yeah. Yeah, that does remind me of an earlier episode. One of my guests was kind of saying SaaS isn't dead, but it's becoming a lot more vertical. So you can build, like you said, instead of paying 99 SaaS bills, for your whatever coffee shop, there's kind of one SaaS that has all of those things baked into it. So there's one SaaS for coffee shops, and it does the 99 features. So you're only paying one or maybe 2 or 3 bills, but still
Yeah,
3 bills instead of
exactly.
99.
Now you have a point of sale that does your, all of your accounting and your finance, and maybe it ties into your social media and marketing. And so you've got, campaigns
Yeah.
on Facebook that give you a coupon code. It's all built in now, right? Whereas all of those used to be completely separate tools, and you had to pay someone to come integrate them at some point, right? And so now the platforms are getting a lot broader, and they have more features and more capabilities. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot of
Which
that.
I agree with you. It's like, that's a good thing. Like, I think anytime we can simplify our lives from a technical perspective, just any regular human, like, the less tech they have to deal with and fight with and pay for, like, ultimately the better for them. So, okay, so I kind of want to go back to, I think this was at Rackspace. You spent a number of years, I think about 15 years at Rackspace, and that's kind of where you started to become more like, they said, hey, Nate, you like talking to people. You go be the manager. I mean, this is the How Not to Build podcast. So, like, how did that go? And kind of looking back now, what was maybe the biggest, mistake you made that
Yeah.
you can pass along to other, because every engineer does this. I mean, it's just the classic, like, a good engineer is actually a terrible manager, yet they all get promoted into being managers. And so it's like, how do we, just any wisdom you have to share from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say my first go at it, I was a complete flop. I look back on that and I was terrible at that job. Terrible, because I told myself a few things that at the time seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And I look back now and I realize how they were all just fundamentally wrong. I said, okay, cool. I know this tech stack. I know the people, I know the product, I know who we're interfacing with in the company. So yeah, it makes perfect sense for me to be the manager because I can keep coding. All I got to do is manage 2 or 3 people that I know really well, and that's easy. They're already my friends. How hard could that be? So I'll stay super technical. Like 80% of my time I'll stay technical, and then 20% of my time I'll do that manager stuff, right?
Mm,
And I realized many years later, I realized that meant that I was truly failing at being a manager,
mm,
right? I thought that I could get that done in my spare time, but the reality is I needed to focus on that. And even with a small team, there was only like, I think 4 or 5 of us at the time. I really, really did need to focus more on being a leader and thinking through the strategy of our product, thinking through the evolution and strategy of our team,
mm.
and working mentoring the individual developers, and I should have been spending a lot more time doing those kinds of things, and I spent almost no time doing any of that. So
Was there like a
that was my fail.
specific pain point or something, like a catalyst that kind of opened your eyes to that?
Yeah, I think so. One of the guys that I was closest to on that team, he moved, and he was working for us remotely. That was the first time I'd ever had a team member who was living in another state at the time. And everything was great at first because we all trusted him, we all knew him. He was delivering really good output, solid software engineer. Then and then over time, the output started to kind of dwindle, and it took a while for us to even really notice it. And then there
Mm,
was a couple of like big deliverables that were just fundamentally missed,
mm,
and I tried to handle it in the best way that I knew how, which is just being a buddy as opposed to being a manager. And it got to the point where things kind of got ugly, and ended up having to let him go. And it was
mm,
the first time I'd ever fired anybody in my entire career. And
mm,
this entire time I didn't have anyone that I was leaning on. My boss was kind of MIA and had other focuses at the time, so I didn't really have a good mentor to teach me how to be a leader. And so I really stumbled my way through all of that, and I know I did a
mm,
very poor job of it. It wasn't until like a year or two later, I got an offer within the company to move to another division as a dev manager. And so it was a new team, new tech stack, new product, new everything. And that was sort of a moment of reset, right? It
mm,
was kind of okay, let's do this new thing. And I learned my lesson, and I'm going to focus as much as I can on being a manager. And I happened to I took this role because I had the opportunity to work for a guy who was a really good people leader. And he taught me how to be a leader. It was the first time I'd ever had anyone as a boss who actually spent a lot of time teaching me how to do those things and guiding me. And so that I felt so much more confident about things after that point.
I just feel like this might be controversial advice, but I feel like I give the advice a lot that basically like you need to find people you can learn from, even if that means a pay cut. Because the things that you will learn having a good, like your example is so perfect, right? Like when you don't have a mentor, and I don't mean that like even from a formal perspective, but when you have nobody around you who's kind of done it before, who's there that you can ask questions to, they can coach you along. When you're by yourself, like it is just, you don't learn anything, you struggle through it, you make a bunch of mistakes, and you don't even necessarily know why they are mistakes. And so to me, it's like I could spend 6 to 12 months like floundering and like not actually doing a good job, or I can take a 5% pay cut or whatever. That's extreme probably, but 2 or 3% pay cut, go work for somebody who can actually teach me a bunch. And then the next job I get, maybe I get a 10% raise, right? So even when you aggregate that out over a 5, 10, 15-year period, I feel like even if money is your only metrics of success, which it shouldn't be, but if it is, like even that part, I believe pays off in time if you're just really focused on being under the right people that you can learn a lot from and who can guide you. Would you say that's true?
Oh, 100% true, right? Think of that as an investment in your skill set, and think of that as it goes back to that axe sharpening, comment that we were talking about earlier, right? There's a period of time where you need to invest in yourself and focus on learning a particular craft. If you're really lucky, like early in my career, I was able to teach myself how to code.
Mm.
I didn't need someone. I didn't need a book. I didn't need a teacher. I was self-taught enough that I could learn that. You can't learn how to be a manager just waking up one day and deciding to do it.
Yeah.
And you could read 20 books and it's not going to make you a better manager. Having someone, whether it's a mentor who is your immediate supervisor or someone else, a friend somewhere else in the company that you could go to from time to time and just bounce ideas and problems and up against, who can guide you through these things. I've found that so valuable that even after I moved on from that manager that I had that was really, really good at that with me, I would still go back to him. I'd still take him to lunch every now and then and say, hey, I'm struggling with this thing. I'm in a whole other division. I may be in another company, but I'm struggling with this thing this week. And help me wrap my head around what I need to, how to break this down, how to solve this problem. And I do that for a bunch of people. I have found myself, I really enjoy being that mentor to people who are at a phase in their career, first time manager, or they've been a dev manager for a while, but this is their first VP role. And so they're really, really hitting this moment where the dev manager to VP track, usually through director, is big. That's a huge delta there between the expectations of those roles. And so helping people understand what it's like to do that role is, I think, I don't know, I feel it's very rewarding because it helps me refresh my sense of how you should really do things, but they get value out of it too.
So if anybody needs help, call Nate.
Call me. I love it. Love it. I think you made a statement a minute ago that I'm going to go back to. You said something about, whether money shouldn't be your like true gauge of success. And I feel personally, and this may sound a little bit corny, right? But it's super true. If you know me, you know that it's true. I view my career as having been successful because I've had people who have worked for me who have at some point in time gone on to C-level roles, right? Whether it's a CTO or a CISO or whatever, people who've worked for me have gone on to do some big and amazing things. I take so much pride in that, right? I love seeing other people's success. And even if just for a small period of time, I had some little part to play, right? There's chief product officers, technology officers, and information security officers out there who have spent time with me. And I just love that. I think that's great.
I love that. I mean, I think the thing that surprises me, and it shouldn't surprise me, but it does, Nate, is that if you go listen to, I almost want to say anybody who's anybody. I mean, we mentioned the Lex podcast earlier, Lex and DHH. You listen to anybody like DHH who's like been out there for a minute, lived a bit, accomplished some things, and they pretty much all say the same thing. It's like, it really, in the end of the day, like your happiness, your satisfaction in life, it does not come from the money. It comes from, the relationship with your spouse, your kids, even other friendships and stuff like that. And yet every generation that comes up just gets so focused on like the badges they can put on their shirt and the money, the salary number that they can make and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know. It like, do you have any additional words of wisdom to kind of help that truth sink in?
I think that your title and your compensation and your role and all these things are the easiest thing to control in the short term, right?
Mm,
You can take that job, you can aspire to that promotion, you can lobby for that pay raise, and those are things that are kind of incremental steps that you can usually achieve. And that's fine. I'm not trying to say that those aren't necessary in one's career, because I think taking big leaps like that, leaps of faith, force you to learn a lot along the way, right? And so that, I think that's great. That helps you evolve and grow as a technology worker and leader. But spend time giving back is
mm,
honestly the only way to do it. And you can't really fake it. You can't just one day decide I'm going to mentor 5 people today, and like let me figure out how to do that and check that box. No, you reach out to people that look like they're struggling in a way that you can help them with and offer to help them with no expectation of anything in return, no
mm,
expectation of a long-term relationship, of mentorship, anything. You just offer to help, and you keep doing that, and you start to develop that muscle, and then you build a reputation as, wow, that Dan guy sure has been helpful to me. I
mm.
know this other like up and coming director, and she's been a director for 6 years and can't seem to break out of that. And I wonder if Dean could help her just kind of like think through and like pull out of that tailspin, and let me connect you two. And I think doing something like that, and you have no more involvement in it other than connecting two people,
Mm.
man, you've helped someone in their career in a big way. And so just try to be helpful. Sounds simple, but just be helpful.
I love that. And I love what you said about that being a muscle that gets exercised and you sort of, I think not only do you become better at it over time, but like you said, I think it also starts to shift your perspective a little bit. I think it helps as you do it more, you start to truly imbibe the value of doing it. And it's a positive feeding cycle, right?
I was giving some advice at San Antonio Startup Week. It happened a couple weeks ago here, and somebody was asking me a question about, I'm an introverted software developer. You gave me some guidance to go network more. How do I do that? Like, how do I even? I'm not comfortable. I'm not used to that. How do I get started? And I told them, go to an event. Just go to an event, even if it scares you and makes you a little bit uncomfortable. Just go and introduce yourself to 5 people that you don't already know. You probably know a couple of people, and your tendency will be to gravitate to them.
Right.
And that's not bad. Maybe go find them first, but go introduce yourself to 5 people that you have never met before, just cold, and strike up a conversation. And that's sort of like the first level. The next level is introduce 2 other people,
Yeah.
right? And help grease those wheels with the other person or two that's also kind of introverted and awkward and not feeling comfortable being there. Go do that. And if you start to get okay at that, not even great or good,
Mm,
just okay at that, that is going to help you tremendously in your career.
I love that. A piece of advice somebody gave me one time was even in those conversations, ask the person, like introduce yourself with the purpose of asking, who are you here to connect with? Who are you looking to connect
Yes.
with? Who are you here to meet? And if you go start just asking everybody, like 30-second conversations, intros, who are you here to meet? You get through like 5 or 10 people, and then it's like, well, I met Nate over there. He's actually doing this TeleDoc thing, right? And they're looking for investors. So like, I would love to introduce you guys. And immediately you're putting that goodwill out there and establishing real connections, right?
Yeah. That's great
Yeah.
advice. I love that.
Yeah. No, I think what you said is spot on. Okay, so back to the regular scheduled programming. So you're at Rackspace about 15 years. You kind of make that transition into product management.
Yeah.
And I think you also kind of talked, I think prior about how that ended up making you a better engineering leader. Yeah, what can you tell us about that?
That was a crazy left-hand turn in the middle of my career. And I was working with the it was kind of the early days of the OpenStack and the cloud business at Rackspace, and we had some kind of shared computing. It was kind of evolving into the cloud, and we brought in some new leaders who were kind of reorganizing and restructuring the organization side of the Rackspace cloud. product management, software engineering, all the ancillary functions into these product stacks, right? These product lines. And kind of as that was starting to roll out, I had a leader who I trusted a lot and had a lot of respect for reach out to me with the most outlandish offer. And he said, I'm starting one of these product lines, and we don't really have a name for it yet because we're trying to figure out what it actually is. It's not compute, storage, or networking, or databases, or anything like that. It's all the fundamental stuff that makes a cloud operate, right? It's
Mm,
billing, it's the customer data model, it's usage processing, it's authentication and authorization, it's like all of this random kind of infrastructure-y kind of stuff, like
mm,
non P&L kind of non-revenue generating stuff. I need to build up an entire org structure for this, and I want you to come in as a product manager for me. And I thought, what are you like? What product? I'm not a product guy at all. I have a lot of respect for product management, but I'm a software engineer. And he says, no, 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 I get it. I get it. But I want someone who can come in and think through the long-term vision, the strategy, the roadmap for all of these things. Like just look at identity alone, someone who understands the engineering side of identity, who uses identity systems as an engineer, but who can think about the long-term strategy, who can look at the market and see what are the big competitors doing and how do we innovate on this. And so whether it's billing or usage processing or identity, like we need engineering kind of thinkers in
mm.
product roles. And so I said, okay, I don't know if this is the right thing for me, but what the heck, right? I'll give it a shot. And so I took that leap, and I learned a lot about the product management discipline. And I'll never walk away thinking I am a product manager, right? I'm not as good at that as I probably should be, but I understand the discipline, and I understand it taught me how to have a fundamental level of respect for the relationship between software engineering and product management in a way that I think I understood at a surface level before, but didn't have direct firsthand knowledge of. And so yeah, it was an excellent foray. And I look, things moved around. There was a period of time where I had engineering rolling up to me. I was director of product management. There's a period of time where I had development and DevOps and everything rolling up to me, and
Mm,
it's like, okay, now it's a little bit more my home.
yeah,
But I stayed close to the code as much as I could as an engineer, as a product leader. Attended OpenStack summits. And I'm in design reviews of the OpenStack identity Keystone at the time, right? Like how this
yeah.
works, and because I knew how we were going to be implementing that for our customers, and so it was important for me to be able to bridge those two universes in a way. And yeah, it was great. It taught me a lot. I realized that I prefer engineering to product management. I prefer leading teams of
Sure.
engineers, but and then look, like a lot of other things in life, like I moved on and ended up, being chief technology and product officer a couple of times. And
Mm,
so like I had product managers rolling back up to me a couple of
yeah.
different times. And so yeah, so that was my little foray, and it surprises people because what's really funny about that is that I keep running into people who I worked with at Rackspace in those years, handful of years, who think of me as a product guy, and even now they're like, "Hey, how's product management going?" I'm like, "I don't know, I couldn't tell you. I've
Yeah.
I've been doing engineering for all of my 30 some odd year career, except for those 4 years that you knew me." So it's funny that people like have that label that they put on me now just because I
Yeah,
did that little stint.
right. They only see you in that one little
Yeah,
sliver of
yeah,
time
yeah, yeah.
wearing that hat. Is there so I was in a conversation maybe last week with a very non-tech person. I guess I wouldn't call them a product person, maybe more of like a C-suite type of person. And for me, it's still a challenge when I talk to those folks to remove all of my technical stuff, right? There's all this, there's the jargon, there's the tech debt, this, that, right? It's like nobody freaking cares about your tech debt, right? When it comes to, C-suites or even a lot of product that I've worked with in the past, they're like, I mean, I might as well be speaking Spanish or whatever, which is ironic because you're working for a Spanish company and that's what you're
Yeah,
all
yeah,
about. But anyway,
yeah,
so I guess is there any like, tips from that foray into product management, especially around communication, like as rising engineers working more with non-technical folks, product folks, C-suites, what tips can you tell us about just communication practices and what we can do to work together better?
I see this as a challenge at all levels of engineering. And I think we go back to some of the advice that we were talking about earlier about understanding fundamental business problems. I
Mm,
think as engineers, it's very easy to get deep into the weeds of my tech stack this, my tech debt, the precise process that I go through with engineering and my CI/CD process and deployments. Am I tracking my DORA metrics properly? And all these like little in the weeds things. And those are important. I'm not trying to do a disservice to those. Those are actually very fundamentally important, but you are not paid to produce good DORA metrics and to ship PRs. You're not. You're paid to deliver business value. And so if you
yeah.
don't understand the business value and you can't speak to the feature that you're building and how it improves this business, why our customers need it, then that's an issue. There's some kind of issue with the organizational structure, right? And too much isolation between engineering and product, or not enough pushback between engineering and product.
Mm,
A healthy tension is good because it forces a product manager to better articulate the business value of the thing. And then if an engineer can't re-articulate the business value of the thing that they are building, then you have issues. You're gonna build the wrong thing. You just
yeah.
will. And because lots of little decisions get made in the heat of battle, right at the, where the requirements end and the code begins. And if the engineer doesn't know how to make little spot decisions along the way that fundamentally build what the business wants, then the business will suffer. And so I don't have a perfect way to solve that other than as an engineering leader, I have to make sure that the engineering and product are working well together in that regard. And we're developing the thing that the business most fundamentally wants. And I think we hire a different kind of engineer now than we did 30 years ago, 25,
Mm,
30 years ago. There was this tendency to hire the rock star engineer, right? The
mm,
brilliant a-hole who you throw him in a cave, you
mm-hmm.
feed him a bunch of requirements and Red Bull, and at the end of the day, at the end of the week or whatever, you're going to get this like brilliant output. And I think we've evolved in so much since then. And the reality now is it is so I would much rather hire 1.5 to 3 software engineers that maybe aren't quite as like absolutely Einstein level brilliant as that earlier example, but who get along well together and
Mm,
who know how to talk and know how to talk to others in the business. I think communication skills, conversation skills, these are things that I look for when I'm hiring software engineers now.
mm,
I want to be able to have a conversation with you about the code you wrote. I don't want you to be condescending about it. I want you to actually explain why you built what you built. And I want to be able to explain to you, look, we're building this because our customers need this thing. Here's what the customers need. And so when you go build it, I need to know that you understand that. And I can have a conversation with you about that. And so I think we look at that differently now than we did 25, 30 years ago.
I think that's really good. And it reminds me of, I mean, you kind of said this, but just to underscore it, is that simple act of saying back to the person what you heard.
Yes.
They teach that in like freaking like marriage therapy courses and stuff like that, right? It's like, but
That,
it
that's
all
the reason they do that. There's a
and there's a
reason they do
reason.
that.
There's a reason they do that, right? Which I guess I don't have to list them all out, but like, that just the simple things like that, the simple communication skills, trust, like skills of communication that build trust, making sure the person heard you, also making sure that you actually understand what they're saying. It's just those simple things. And I think you're right that it's for a lot of engineers, it's somewhat opposite of our nature, right? Our nature is just like, tell me the math, I'll do the math, we'll be done. That's what I love. I love the math. Like why, talk about all the other stuff. But I think you're right that especially as you're growing as an engineering leader, those things become much more important.
I think in certain size organizations, that doesn't apply to probably every single member of the team as much.
Mm-hmm.
But, because look, your junior developers are still kind of learning the craft, and it's the mid and
Mm-hmm.
senior engineers that are doing most of that, understanding what the product manager said, pushing back and getting clarification of the requirements enough to hand some very niche little slice of work to a junior engineer. And so it's maybe not as important, but especially the more you move up the totem pole, right? The more leadership kind of a role you take on, absolutely that's so much more important of a skill to have requirement.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is part of why I think AI is not going to come in and fully replace either
Mm,
of our jobs, right? Because I don't know about you, and as much great things as I could say about product management, I never in my life had bulletproof, ironclad requirements handed to me the first time, right? It's even the best product managers I have ever worked for. There's always been discussion and dialogue and clarification and what engineering saying, hey, this thing you're asking for is that's actually way more complicated than you might
yeah.
realize for this weird esoteric reason. And products saying, okay, well, let's talk about how we compromise on that. And I think if requirements were just perfect, then a non-technical person using the right AI tool
Mm,
could come in and say, yeah, go build me XYZ, and you're fine. But the AI is going to make a whole lot of assumptions about those little nuanced details. And
yeah.
oh, I'm going to give up all semblance of scalability to follow the instructions you gave me blindly without telling you that that was a decision that I
Right.
made, right?
Right.
Whereas a software engineer, a good seasoned team is going to say, hey, what you're trying to do is going to introduce this numerical sequential ID, but we have this like global infrastructure that is going to have a really hard time generating sequential integers at a global scale unless it's
Hmm.
a singular centralized service. Now we're violating our geographic,
Yeah.
requirements. Oh, wow, that's a really good point, Nathan. Let's figure out how, so let's adjust the requirements. And so I think you're always going to
Yeah.
need that clarification.
I do think I've thought about this a lot actually, even just in how I use my AI, but I do think there's at least two, if not three levels that I'm not convinced yet that AI will ever solve it, because I think the first level is the requirements, like you're saying. I think the second level is, I guess what I'm calling like the architecture. Like you said, like there's so many detailed technical choices of like, well, are we using Kafka or are we using all AWS, all open source or all AWS, or these kinds of like trade-offs that actually have pretty big ramifications. You brought up scaling for like one obvious one, but even other like integration stuff that product people would never know to like ask the question or think about. It's like they'll say, I'll make it integrate with whatever Google. It might even say password lists and like these kinds of things, but there's still, it's like, well, do we go direct? Do we go through a, OAuth service? What I think there's so many technical things that those decisions, somebody has to understand the tech and how it impacts the business, to your point earlier, in order to help, even if AI is doing it, help that AI do the right thing at the right time. And I think the third level is even if I have the requirements, even if I have the design, how do I go about building it? Because one thing I find AI doing all the time, right, is it starts to go off the rails with this, or it starts to, it wants to do 20 tasks, but it does them horizontally when maybe I want it to do it vertically because I want to, check in at certain points, or I want to release a little bit of the feature, not the whole feature. So I think there's like all these other execution decisions that actually, like maybe it'll get there at some point, but even that I feel like is kind of like you're saying, there's that negotiation between technical and product. And I think that same negotiation has to be somehow, like the AI has to be able to do that to piecemeal these things together, because even if you're feeding it just the requirements and you're not technical, it does one third of it and you say, you know what, stop, that's good enough, ship it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't get that chance if the AI is just doing everything on its own. Anyways, I don't
And
know if,
I think that's an excellent point. And I think you could be as explicit as you can be as humanly possible about the narrow thing that you want done. And that's the best way to use these AI tools is to
mm,
get it to do very tiny things, one thing at a time, and
mm-hmm,
build on it from there, right? Like you could tell Claude, I want to do this big grandiose thing. But we're going to start with this tiny piece of it. But use that big vision as your kind of like long-term view, but I'm going to do this tenth of it right now. And here is the very specific things. Don't do anything more than this. And I'm going to check in with you all along the way and make sure that you haven't done something bad. You haven't turned off SSL certificates because you couldn't provision a cert. Well, we have
yeah,
compliance requirements that
yeah,
require these things. And so like you do have to be just absolutely explain like I'm five level, crayon level explanations of the tiny thing that we're trying to build right now. And it'll do an okay job.
yeah,
But yeah, and I think it's also hard for teams to sit down and think through all of those fundamental
yes,
requirements. right?
Yes.
That you never want your LLM to disregard. It's some of it's pretty obvious, right? You follow this code style, follow this architecture style, use these frameworks, use these very specific versions of these frameworks,
Mm,
whatever reason you may have. Like you could define those kinds of things. But how do you tell your tools to not introduce design patterns that aren't user intuitive? And how do you
mm-hmm,
tell them to make processes as simple as possible, like what could be a 5-step UI flow in a web
mm-hmm,
form. If I don't want it to ever go more than 2 or 3, and you have to define all of those just fundamental product principles ahead of time. And so if you combine all the technical guidelines, the compliance guidelines, the security guidelines, the product guidelines, now your
mm.
context window is just massive. And I think that's where this whole like agentic model, where you have lots of agents doing lots of things. You have a security engineer agent, you have a software development agent, you have a quality assurance agent, and they all are doing just their little task, and they toss work back and forth between each other. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
right kind of model, but it takes a lot of setup to get to that point.
Yeah, and the other thing you made me think of there that I think is important for both technical and non-technical people to understand is that coding and software development, software engineering, it's a science, but it's also an art. And a lot of that art comes out in the negotiations, in the iterations. Like you said, even a product person will never churn out perfect requirements the first time. So there has to be this space. Like, it kind of goes back to like the 9 women can't have a baby in 1 month thing. It's like there's kind of this necessary space that should be created that allows us to kind of have those conversations, negotiations. And that's, I think, where the art form starts to come out a little bit is, it's not just do a messaging queue. It's like, well, which one? Why? Where do we think this is going? Hey, we're under the gun. We have 3 months to deliver. So I'm
Yeah.
going to do it in Postgres, whatever.
And at some point, like if you and I were to somehow have this brain dump of all of our technical knowledge and learnings and understandings of frameworks and tool choices and what have you, if we could kind of brain dump all of that, right, into markdown files that we could feed into
Mm-hmm.
the AI agent of our choice, that's great. Yours and mine would look very different. We've both
Yeah.
built and launched successful things in our career. And what I believe to be true, I probably haven't always believed to be true. I've learned a lot of things along the way. And the world has changed along the way,
Mm.
right? I used to love CVS. There was a time where CVS was like a great source code repository tool. And then we realized that Subversion and Git were infinitely better for a
Yeah.
wide variety of reasons. And we've learned a lot along the way. So I think that any of that knowledge is kind of like a point in time thing. And I can think of 10 different ways to solve the message queue. I've probably implemented 5 of them at least. And I can tell you that 2 of them were terrible design choices. And so now I want to choose the one that's going to scale the best, or
Mm-hmm.
is the simplest to implement, or adheres to whatever kind of compliance or scalability requirements that I might have.
Yeah.
And what is true for one specific customer right now is going to be different for another one. So I think that Postgres and MySQL are both great databases to use on just kind of standard day-to-day projects. I think I would make different choices about them in different scenarios. You asked me early on, what's your favorite tech stack, Nate? And it depends. The
Yeah.
honest answer is it depends on the situation. And I think you have to listen to the business, you have to listen to the people, you have to understand the team that is working with a product in order to better understand what the right
Mm-hmm.
choice is for that scenario. And
Yeah.
in that environment, MariaDB is probably a great example. But in a different environment, different team, same product, different team, Postgres may be a better tool for a variety of reasons. And so, it just depends, is the
Yeah.
honest truth.
No, and I think that's one of the traits of a great engineering leader too, is they might have their favorites. Like there is a special place in my heart for, JavaScript and even TypeScript. And I see people bashing it and this and that. And I've kind of been forced to do Python lately against my will. But even as I've done it, I'm like, you know what? Even though I can do ML in JavaScript, like I'm not going to, like that's not the right choice, right? For a particular project, like you said. So I think that's being able to put your own preferences aside and choose the right things, like you said, even considering that the team, the humans that are there, like sometimes that's a bigger factor than the actual technology is the humans and what do they want to do? Why do they want to do it? Etc. We are over the hour mark, and I know we're like halfway through your career here.
Jeez, yeah.
So
Yeah, I think I could probably get through an
yeah,
overview of the
we'll try
rest
to
if you
pick up
want.
because I think the main thing is I want to make the connection between, from Rackspace, you went on and eventually became CTO. So maybe
Yes.
kind of connect those dots
Yeah.
into, the major steps there and how you got there.
Sure. So I left Rackspace. I needed to spread my wings. 15 years in a single company is a long time, and I loved the people. I loved the tech. I loved the company. I just needed to try something different. And so I from there I worked at a couple of different companies that were in the, I don't know, 80 to 250 person range, and had a really great time, and kind of moved into the VP role at some point and was running teams of engineers, DevOps, compliance, you name it, even IT. And I was having fun at that. And I got an opportunity. I had an old coworker reach out to me and offer me a CTO role at a company. And I thought about it really hard because I was working at a company that had an amazing tech stack, and we had CI/CD process that was super mature. We were doing 10 to 15 releases a day, no sweat.
Hmm.
It was amazing. It was by far the most rapid engineering pipeline I had ever worked at, and I was loving it. It was really great. And so I had a lot of things going for me there, but I thought to myself, okay, CTO, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but it's a small company, and learning how to be a CTO for a CEO that's a really good mentor and a really good thought leader, and just an all-around great guy. Like, I could learn how to do this here.
Hmm.
And that's an interesting opportunity. And so I took that, and hindsight 2020, it wasn't the right role for me. At the moment, I thought, okay, well, he had just bought several companies and was merging them together and needed help kind of integrating them all. And I had gone through that before. I had done some of that at a couple of companies. And so I thought, okay, well, let's get through the kind of early stages of tech and company and team integration. And then we'll start to innovate on top of that, right? We have a bunch of these parts and pieces. Let's go build cool backup and disaster recovery products on top of that. And so that was the vision, that was the idea. And it turned out that the integration of those companies was going to take years
Hmm.
longer than any of us thought it was because
Hmm.
of a wide variety of reasons, most of which includes complexity of doing business in Europe across multiple jurisdictions that have weird laws related to not just labor, but contracting and contracts and all of this. And it was super complicated. Merging CRMs, merging when you don't have contracts for customers, it's all a mess. It turns out it was really just Salesforce janitor work, and I hired a team to
Hmm.
do it. And I said, you know what, this isn't really for me. I need to move on. So I moved to another role at a company, a local company, who was I was going to be a VP of software engineering, but I was going to be a peer of the CTO. So I was reporting. The CTO and I both reported to the CEO. And so really the CTO just needed a peer who understood like high level technology leadership. And so I worked there for a year, and had a really great time. It was very high stress banking environment,
Hmm.
great people, but the stress level was really high, and I was hitting a point where I was starting to have some health issues, and I needed to back off.
Hmm.
I needed to take a step back, and so I left to become a fractional CTO. Okay, I've been doing CTO level stuff for little over a year now. I'm going to put that to practice for a bunch of other clients. And so the whole fractional leadership thing was starting to kind of a big deal. And this was great because it gave me the opportunity to work as much as I could physically work at that moment to give myself some time to kind of bounce back from the health stuff.
Okay.
And so I did that, and look, it was a challenge because I'm not a sales guy. Like, I'm a people person, and so, man,
Yeah.
I could get referrals for business, and I could knock that out of the park as long as my health was doing good. But I couldn't go cold call sell myself. I'm just not.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that. And so, for a couple of reasons, I decided, you know what, I need to figure out what's next for me. And right at that time, this opportunity to be part of this very early stage startup came across my lap. Again, some old coworkers, several of which were from Rackspace, were starting to put together this telemedicine
Hmm.
opportunity, and they needed a CTO. And at first, I thought, okay, this is just a great CTO fractional CTO gig for me. I'll come in, do as much work as they need of me, and I'll move on. But I realized very, very quickly that this, number one, needed me full time, and number two, was going to blow up and be a really big, big thing. And it was
Mm.
great, great timing because I was looking to get out of the fractional work anyway. And so, yeah, just kind of it came around at the exact right moment in my career. And so, yeah, I've been doing this probably
Okay.
for the last 6 months or so.
So, okay, last 6 months at the current CTO role. So, two questions, and I'll try to make them quick, not too many rabbit trails. But I'm always curious when somebody says, "Oh, we were deploying 15 times a day." What did that actually look like? Like, because in my mind, and this is for the technical people listening, is was that 15 deploys to production? Are those all behind a feature flag? Like, what kind of deployments was there? Like a
Yes, and yes.
Is there a like, hey, you're allowed to deploy like chores and bug tickets to production, but not features, like those are different. Like, what did that actually look like?
We didn't necessarily differentiate bugs from features. We had teams that worked both. Individual teams could do both kinds of work, et cetera. And so there wasn't any rhyme or reason to what gets deployed in a given day. Yes, everything was behind feature flags. I think feature flag is one of the most important and vital components
Mm.
of a pipeline like that. And so, yeah, there were 15 deployments a day, and a lot of times those features were off for most people. But we had a healthy culture of cleaning things up, cleaning up feature flags, using them only as long as you need them, and we could do production level validation and testing as much as we needed to in prod. And so we had non-prod environments, and we deployed to those quite often, like all the time, even more so,
Yeah, yeah.
and obviously, and so we get product manager kind of stakeholder sign off on things in those lower environments before we would deploy to prod. But I think in the 3.5 years I was there, I only remember rolling back like once or twice at the most because it was easier to fix it and roll forward or feature flag it away and roll forward. And so that was the culture. And it was a Ruby on Rails stack. So it was kind of a monolith in a
Mm.
sense, right? There were services that didn't get touched as much, but our Ruby on Rails stack, yeah, dozen deployments in a day was no sweat. That was kind of an average day.
So I'm assuming part of that then is there was heavy instrumentation around like not just feature flagging, but when something immediately rolls out, like what was it, the blue green deployment thing where you're sending a little bit of traffic and then if there's anything wrong, it would like not deploy it? Or like would you consider that a rollback in that case?
No, no, it was not even a blue green deploy, really.
Wow.
It was really like deploy a new container, a new instance of this thing, and drain connections on the old node and route new connections to the new node, time out the old one at some point in time, and then retire it. That every deploy was like that, and so every deploy could
50?
take place in a couple of minutes. Right, we could deploy to the whole infrastructure in a few minutes. And so there were a couple of things that I think were critical to this. I could go on and about
Sure, sure.
everything that was required to make this work, but a couple of the most important ones. Number one, feature flagging, like we talked about. Number two, there was a culture of ownership of the things that you built. Fundamentally, there's no sense of, well, that's a dev problem or an ops problem, and they're not going to really like work well together, and things go over the wall, and it's your responsibility. No, our software engineers would deploy code, and then they would be living in all of our dashboards, all of our ops dashboards, monitoring metrics, logs, everything, watching their thing, watching their baby in production for a while before they moved on.
And can I pause there because I want to clarify something for the listeners because a minute ago you said everything had sign off by product managers and stuff. So if you're deploying 15 times a day, is that 15 sign offs per day also, or were devs
Not for
able?
every, yeah, not for
Okay,
everything. In other words,
okay,
if there's a feature that has a customer impacting change, product manager has given specs for this thing, right? I want to turn this button blue. Dan, you're the developer assigned to it. The product specs and the requirements are here in the story. Once you've got it developed and I can see that in one of our staging environments, I'm like, good, ship it, right? So sign off required for that. But if you're fixing a bug or you're doing some other, you're on step 5 of 15 to make that button blue, and
hmm,
it's feature flagged off and customers aren't impacted by it. You don't need product sign off for that deployment, right? So
and
I'd say
yeah,
80% of our deployments did not need product sign off at all, right? At least. So And so yeah, there was a culture of full ownership of the thing, and the product managers were involved in making sure that we're ready to turn a feature flag on, and you know they're involved in the reveal process, right? The feature
Mm-hmm.
flag management, and then
Mm-hmm.
watching things in production. But yeah, the engineers would fully own that thing
And
all the
the
way through.
and the engineer had the ownership, but also it sounds like the ability to push the deploy to production button
Yes.
themselves without.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's great.
and we relegated that to a certain class of engineers, right? You had to be like a mid to senior, junior engineer. Our goal was to get a junior engineer to get code into production within the first couple of weeks of being
Yeah,
deployed. They may not have been the ones that pushed the button,
sure.
but if you know, I think the hallmark of a really high quality software engineering organization is that a lot of different roles, not just a junior engineer, but even a designer could push the publish button, and some design change goes into prod, and you have enough testing and validation of that to prevent some catastrophic thing from happening. But you're doing things well if you can get all kinds, every role to be able to do a prod deployment.
Excellent.
Now that was the nirvana, and I'll be honest with you, I've never seen that before or since firsthand in my career. I
Sure.
hear stories at conferences where that's true, right? And if you don't know Charity Majors over at
Oh
Honeycomb,
yeah, yeah,
she's
yeah.
one of my favorite people of all time. And like she'll tell these stories about these companies that have that kind of an environment. And so if you've never been in a world where that is the case, it feels almost unattainable. Like you have no idea
Mm,
how you could eventually aspire to get to that point. And so when you're there, man, yeah, hold on to it. And so here
that's
I am in an
awesome.
early stage startup, and I kind of get some eyebrows raised from my couple of engineers when I tell them that I want to be able to do this and I want to start from this point. I
Yeah,
don't want to have to hack our way into it a year for 2 years from now. I want to start that way and not ever give that up.
yeah,
And that's the easiest way to make that happen, I think.
yeah.
But you could
Okay.
always retrofit.
You can't always, but you're right. Certain things are much harder to do so. Okay, I kind of interrupted you because you said there was like there's two or three things that were
Yeah.
critical to making that happen.
Okay, so yeah, feature flagging is very important. And
Yep.
I also think that this culture of true ownership is very important. Making sure that the engineer is not getting their code, deploying it, and then everything after the deploy button becomes a DevOps
Right.
team problem. They have to own it all the way. The DevOps team is always there if there are issues. The DevOps team's getting the pager duty alerts if you know the performance dies or an app is or a node is crashing or something, and they're there to build the infrastructure to make sure that you can do all of these things as a software engineer. But it's really got to be the engineer's responsibility. Once that code is in production, they got to be the ones that are watching the logs, they're watching the monitoring systems, they're making sure that nothing catastrophic has gone wrong after that deployment. So that culture of ownership is super important. And that means that you have software developers that know how to look at
Yeah.
Datadog and Logly or whatever it is, and interpret what they're looking at. And you have to have the tooling set up to where it's easy for them to have that access. They don't need SSH access to production infrastructure, right? But they need some centralization of monitoring and logging and alerting and all these things so that they can do that job better and easier. But that culture has to take place.
Yeah. Can I just say for any younger engineer listening, like that this concept even made it into my company's core values, which the way that I phrase it is baselines, not boundaries. Because I think that I've run across so many engineers when I tell them, go look at the Splunk logs or go look at the New Relic logs, they just have this kind of helpless look about them, like, well, I don't know how to do that though. And I'm like, so go learn it. Like that's part of your
Yeah.
job. Like that's not like, what do you mean? Like you would never say that about a piece of code. Like if I told you to build a feature, you would just go learn whatever you need to learn to build a feature. And I think the same should be true for like any, like you're saying, Nate, like that whole life cycle of your code. To me, all of that, like, and think about it from a perspective of setting yourself apart from your peers and like a career
Yeah.
advancement point of view too. Like if you can go in there and just say, everything is part of my responsibility and I'm just going to go figure it out every single step of the way. Like even if it's a DevOps dashboard or whatever, it's just have that attitude, I think will just propel you forward in your career and improve, the value you're now bringing is just way higher than everybody else around you.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And I think that's a culture that you have to instill that's our job. That's our job as the senior engineering leaders to make
Yeah.
sure that we're hiring for that culture, where we're continuing to proliferate that culture when people push back against it and say, man, that digging through Splunk just sounds really hard, Dan. Well, look, let me show you how to do it. It's a lot
Hmm.
easier than you might think. Here's some fundamental filtering and tips and how to look at the specific things that are related to the concern that you have related to your code. But you have to hire people that are willing to learn whatever it takes. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
100% necessary if you want to have a fast-paced engineering organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So then, um, I want to touch on, you did a couple different CTO roles, both with the fractional thing and with these companies now. So do you have a story for us, right? Like what was your biggest failure so far as a CTO? What did you learn in your career from that?
Oh man, biggest failure as a CTO.
And,
You
and you guys
know,
have heard me talk about the word failure, so I'm not going to qualify that every time. But anyway,
Yeah,
carry on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I've made lots of failures across my career. That's for sure. I think there are times when I kind of let my pride get in the way, and I tried to, I had some health issues, and they were affecting me more than I was willing to admit.
Mm,
And so, like, I wasn't good enough about explaining to others what I needed to back off or why I needed to back down, because I can manage it. I can suck it up and deal with the issues. And I honestly just needed to raise my hand and say, I need some help, and I needed to back off. So I probably made some mistakes that way for sure. I think that first CTO role that I took, I am to this day great friends with that CEO. Like, no hard feelings at all. But man, I look back on that and I think, just taking that job, I didn't learn how to be a CTO from that gig. I learned I learned a little bit about how to work the the senior leadership role in a company, how that function needs to
okay.
be performed. So I learned a little bit about how to be a C-level executive from working with these other peers, but I never really got to do the actual CTO stuff as much as I would like. So I had it to do over again. I wouldn't change that decision. I wouldn't have decided not to take that job because it led me where I am now, fundamentally. Yeah, I didn't get to do it as much as I would like in that moment. I did get to do it for bits and pieces as a fractional CTO, and there were times where I did get to do it even as a VP. I got to act and
Mm,
function at the C level a lot. So yeah, no huge lessons there. I'd say the if I had if I had to kind of call out mistakes that I have made, it's been times where I have kind of bypassed what I consider some of my core values are. And I
mm.
thought, okay, in the moment, I'm gonna kind of sacrifice this fundamental belief I have just for expediency's sake. And then, 6 months later, even 2 months later, man, that really bit me, and I should never have done that. And it wasn't worth the time to market improvement that we got. One of my
So
fundamental
you
beliefs
chose
as
tabs instead of spaces? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just
purely,
kidding.
purely, yeah. Um,
No, please share. I really do want to
Yeah,
know a
so
concrete
like for
example.
example, I think I'm a huge believer in being a people first kind of a listener, being
Mm,
a servant leader, right? My job as a leader is to listen to my team, to talk to my team, to fundamentally understand the people that are involved, the personalities, the skill sets, etc. And because they're all properties of the tools. If you think of a software engineer as a tool, right? There's no two screwdrivers in my toolbox that are alike. They're all a little bit different, and so like learning how the tools all work well makes me understand how I can put them together on a team better. And there are times where I would come in as a fractional leaving and well, I don't have a whole lot of time with this customer, right? They're only paying me for 10% of my time. So that's half a day a week. Like, I don't have time to have one-on-ones with everyone. And there's just
mm,
fundamentally no time to really get to know the people. So I'm going to spend as a fractional CTO, I'm going to spend my time just doing this technology strategy thing that they need. And then I put together a plan that doesn't match up really with what the people are capable of delivering. The stake being there, I should have fundamentally stopped and said, I know that you don't have budget for this thing, but I still need to spend this time. And here's why I need to spend the time getting to know the people just enough. And I can give you a better technology plan. But a technology plan ignoring the people that are involved in implementing it is the recipe for disaster. It's the management consultant coming in and saying, here's my Harvard Business School playbook and go forth and implement. And your engineering team being like, we can't do this. What is this? Right. I did that. And so I did that with a customer in the early days of being fractional, and I regret that. And I gave them
Mm,
a bad deliverable as a result. And I never made that mistake again, right? At that point, I kind of put my foot down with clients and said, what you need is this, and here's what that's going to cost you. And if I'm too expensive for you, then that's great. We could deal with that. But I was nervous about losing a deal on cost. And so I sacrificed all that
mm.
preliminary stuff that honestly is just core to how I operate as a leader.
I appreciate that. That is such a great example. A technology plan that ignores the people will be a disaster.
Every time, almost every single time.
And I love that. I love that. I think that's one thing that, kind of going back to the developer to manager, but even manager to VP, director on up to CEO is like just how relational the CTO role is. All those C-suite roles, right? And I think it's again, that's just a very difficult thing for tech people, especially to learn the muscle that needs to get exercised. So I think that's a great example. So that brings you to TeleDoc. Give us a quick synopsis. I mean, I know you kind of introduced it earlier, but maybe explain a little more about, you know, when you guys started. What's your next big milestone? Give us a little more color there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got started earlier this year, kind of in the March timeframe. A couple people were involved probably a month or two before that, just with ideations on a marker board, really nothing more. And so I got involved to start to wrap my head around the technology and product side of this. I've built healthcare tech and fintech workloads are something I'm very comfortable with and have spent time in my career working with. And so coming in and building a telehealth platform is a natural fit, right? There's a lot of regulatory compliance stuff that needs to happen, a lot of security stuff that needs to happen. Fundamentally, there's nothing rocket sciencey about a telehealth platform, right? You're connecting, we're like connects riders with a pool of drivers, and we connect patients with a pool of doctors, and we have some tech platform that helps facilitate that communication and data flow. And so there's a lot of fundamental stuff you have to build, right? Just general patient EHR kind of stuff that you have to build to make a platform like that viable. And that's what we're working on right now. And so we have the base platform built. Now we're building kind of the patient and doctor interfaces on top of that. And we're hoping to have a product go to market in Q1. Here we are, like a third of the way through Q4, and so we'll be starting to actually test with live in real time with patients and doctors next quarter. So in kind of Q1 timeframe, we have demo right now that's totally clickable and usable, and we've been getting feedback from patients and doctors and adjusting the strategy as we go and learning a lot in the process. We have boots on the ground building a network of doctors right now, and we're in the middle of fundraising. So we're kind of in the early stages of raising a couple $1 million to make this happen. So anybody who wants to talk about funding in this environment, I would love to talk to. We just joined Capital Factory a few weeks ago.
Nice. Yep.
So that's been amazing. The folks up there are super great, and I'll be in Austin a lot more here soon, and spending time with investors and mentors up there. And it's interesting because it's funky. We're launching in Mexico. We're a US based company launching in the Mexico market, and then we'll roll into other Latin American markets. We have about 20 countries in Latin America that we're targeting right now.
Okay.
Well, we're in talks with people about going global beyond that as well. So we're not tied to Latin America. That's just our initial footprint.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because investors fall into a whole bunch of different little niche camps, and they don't realize that how narrow they are because they're very broad in a sense. But I've met with a bunch of investors that are very keen to raise money in the healthcare tech space in the U.S. market. And I've talked to other fundraisers who are very interested in helping to fund Latin American based businesses. But not a lot of people that want to do both. And so there's some fundamental misunderstandings of how business operates in Mexico that I think kind of prevents fundraisers from being super eager to take those risks on. So we've been challenged a little bit with that, but we've broken through that. It just means that our pool of investors is smaller, but the
Sure.
ones who are interested are even more interested because there's not a lot of people doing what we're doing. And so that traction and excitement is really palpable. And that's the most energizing thing ever. Love it.
Man, I'm glad to hear it. So if there's any investors listening or somebody who knows of an investor who's maybe willing to be a little more niche, let's say, in their investments, definitely give Nathan a shout. We'll put his stuff in the show notes, of course. And also you can, if you don't know how to get a hold of Nathan, you can always just DM me on LinkedIn and I'll make sure that you guys get in touch. Anybody else that you're looking to connect with?
We have a lot of really great relationships built up already in Mexico. I've been spending personally a lot of time in Guadalajara and Mexico City, kind of cultivating some of those relationships with our launch partners. And we're starting to have conversations with pharmacy chains to do fulfillment there and hospital systems for to kind of tap into this pool of doctors that's available out there. So from those perspectives, we're starting to get things lined up, and we've got the right kind of healthcare tech lawyers in Mexico that are helping guide us on what does the regulatory compliance side of the world look like in Mexico.
Yeah,
it's very different than here in the U.S. and in a lot of ways it's simpler. And so, but we got the right people who are helping us navigate that. Yeah. So
that's a big operation. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And what's interesting too is it's not just Mexico healthcare law that we got to adhere to. We have to think a little bit about the next handful of
Yeah.
countries, what differences there might be, and make sure our platform can adhere to any and all of those requirements as we move forward. So that's kind of interesting. No, I think the investors is probably the biggest area where we need help kind of meeting people and getting that lined up. Always eager to talk to software engineers who have the appetite to work at a very early stage startup like this. I think as funding rolls in, we're going to be hiring a little bit more and bringing people on who are willing to take on these completely crazy days of very early stage startup and full stack engineer kind of people. Man, if you've got the appetite for that, then talk to me.
Yeah.
Like I'd love to hear about that.
I used to tell it wasn't quite a startup. It was a small company, a consultancy. And I used to tell every new hire, it's like, it's a roller coaster. And if you have the stomach for it, you will have a lot of fun. But if you don't, you're going to hate it. So like, don't be too starry-eyed about the startup life because there's kind of a real cost. And some people love it. It's great for some people, but it really is not for everybody.
And I found the developers that we have right now have done the early stage startup stuff before, so they know what to expect. It's not their first rodeo.
Nice.
And that's working great. So if you've done it before and you're willing to wear a bunch of hats and not have a whole lot of direction and be part of helping set the direction, right? And then man, let's talk. Like I want people who can help ideate on what our core values should be and challenge the status quo on things. Well, we did it this way poorly 5 times. I've always wanted to do it this other way. Cool, do it.
Right.
Just do it that way. Like implement that thing. Do it that way, and let's start off on the right foot. Right. I want people who are willing to bring good ideas to the table and help implement.
Excellent. Well, I hope that if nothing else, putting this podcast out there and hopefully it'll connect you with some good people, Nate. Is there anything else before we wrap up? Anything else you want to share?
No, I think you covered a lot of stuff. I think the world is changing a lot. Be adaptable, right? Everything about our industry is so radically different now than it was 5 years ago. And the people that survive this are the people who are adaptable and willing to learn new stuff. Just learn the new stuff. That's it. Just take the time.
Take the time.
And if you think that your job tomorrow is going to be exactly the way it was 3-5 years ago, I'm sorry. You're wrong. So, just learn new stuff.
Great advice. Nathan, thank you so much for the time. I know it was a bit long. I hope that's okay on your Friday afternoon, but
All good.
Great conversation. Yeah,
Likewise,
man, I wish you the best of luck.
check in with me in a couple years and we'll see how things go.
Hopefully not a couple years. Hopefully, like,
Yeah.
maybe after your next round or something, we can come on
Sounds
and
good.
do a little promo. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, Dan. Good talking.